If you go from 5 to 0, that's a 100% decrease. Same as if you go from 1 to 0, I guess. So, impact maybe feels the same.
Well, if ChatGPT can't do it, then what makes you think you could do it?
Is still brought to you by Budweiser. It doesn't matter if they're paying me.
Sam Altman can get away with it, okay? He's the best looking guy in tech.
The Rays still cannot be broadcast together.
Wrong on both accounts. Wrong on all accounts. All accounts.
Hello and welcome to the Dirty Data Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Wimpy. So excited to be bringing you the dirtiest, filthiest in data analytics, tech, machine learning, AI, all the biggest buzzwords that you got. We got dirt on them and we're bringing them to you today. Loyal listeners, I apologize for the gap in listening. We had the 4th of July holidays. We had a small medical situation in the Wimpy household. That's okay. It's all resolved. Since for the loyal listeners, my father, I'll let you know everybody's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, kids. Those are the real dirty data points. Your kids, those are dirty, filthy, nasty things. But look, one of the great things is if there's ever a gap in the show, it's not because there's a lack of interesting, dirty data stories. Because we got a backlog, okay? There's a lot of stuff going on. We're going to talk about a few stories today. Soham Parekh, job hopper extraordinaire. We got an AI empathy study by Nature. And then we got a landmark publication that shows how AI can speed up your time it takes to code. Yeah, go ahead and unravel that one, you linguist. It's counterintuitive. Goodness gracious. All right, but first, today's Dirty Data Show is brought to you by Yingling. It's a traditional lager in this awkward green translucent bottle. I tell you what, Yingling, founded in Pennsylvania, I normally try to avoid as an anti Phillies and Eagles person. But we're recording this just a day after Kyle Schwarber hit a Schwar bomb to win things for the National League in the All-Star game. So you know what? We're celebrating with his favorite beer, maybe, possibly. I base this on nothing at all, besides I think Yingling is from Pennsylvania. Is it even? Leave a note in the comments if I'm from Pottsville. Is that over on the eastern uh, Philly side? Or is that over on the Paul Skeens Pittsburgh side? Leave a note in the comments. Do we have comments? Are they down there? Go ahead, leave one. Anyways, let's get into the stories for today. The first one, Soham Parekh. Are you listening to the show because you're trying to break into dirty and to dirty data? If you're trying to break into dirty data, I I appreciate you being forthright. If you're trying to break into data and analytics and tech, there's probably better shows to listen to, but this one is more entertaining than those nerds. Look, if you're trying to, don't listen to this story because it's going to set you back. Soham Parikh had 47 jobs in data and tech. He is an interviewer extraordinaire, and he went viral back a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of July because he got found out by me. No, not me. I'm just kidding. I just read the news about him. Now you're listening to the news about him. Here's the thing. He was a serial interviewer, generally not at like FANG type companies, but like VC backed new money startups in the AI world, which is a pretty tight knit community, and word gets around. And so word got around that Soham Parikh maintained multiple full time jobs at once. Now, he didn't take the jobs too seriously, didn't do a whole lot of work, didn't make a whole lot of contributions, but damned if he wasn't a great interviewer because he's working at the tippy top, the forefront, cutting edge of AI and tech. So he must be a really good interview to get these jobs. And then at one point, it's probably not known exactly, but at one point, the most reported was that he had five full-time jobs at the same time. And these aren't twiddle your thumb, night watchman jobs. No offense, night watchman. You know what you signed up for. You don't do shit. These are, at least pretend to work really hard, VC backed startups where the culture is hustle, hustle, hustle and grow, grow, grow. And one job should be enough to, send people into hard drugs, at the age of 26. Soham here's got five of them at once. I, I work one job half time and it's exhausting. That's why I'm drinking my Kyle Schwarber Yingling Express here at whatever o'clock in the morning it is. But Soham got found out because of social media posts. And all of a sudden, hey, don't interview this guy. And word gets around the VC community that this guy's sort of a serial good interviewer and then ghosted employee. Now, allegedly Soham had his sort of workshop of laborers where he's probably taken about a 99% cut of that sweet juicy senior cloud engineer position, whatever his actual position was. He's taken a nice cut of that salary, and then getting a couple of Upwork folks to do it for $10 an hour to a passable level until he can maybe get equity in one of these startups that blows up. But he's been removed from all of the teams as far as I can tell. He might be down to zero jobs. If you go from five to zero, that's a 100% decrease. Same as if you go from one to zero, I guess. So, it's, impact maybe feels the same. Um, but the temperature around Soham Parikh is a bit divided. Some people think this guy is just an absolute scam artist and he's lying to get his foot in the door to try to make high salary or get vested in one of these high value startups. Some people think he's a hero and he's sticking it to the man. He's busting up the work culture. Hey, you're gonna be remote and require these ridiculous interviews and then give no oversight to your employees, well, then you're going to incentivize this kind of behavior where Soham is incentivized to be good at getting jobs. And he was, and he got a bunch of good ones. And he got some pretty fat paychecks. I can only assume that's not been reported as far as I can tell. Uh, I I'm just I'm just impressed. I think the incentive structure is there for Soham to do this. It's there for the next Soham too. The next Soham is probably not Soham. It's probably five different names for five different jobs instead of the exact same job with the exact same image and you know, face profile picture on LinkedIn. Soham was pretty blatant about it. I guess he thought it was a good enough interview. He could overcome everything. But come on, agentic AI now, it should be pretty easy to populate a, a fake persona. If you're a good interviewer, just go interview and collect those big bucks and force good people like me to have to go back into the office because employers can no longer trust remote workers because of the Soham Parikhs of the world. That's what I'm pulling for. You linguist have a lot of work to do today. Linguist can disentangle that one to see exactly what it is that I'm going for. Yingling traditional lager, bringing you this episode of the Dirty Day Show. Our next show is our next show. We're not moving on from this show. You're still in this show. You're not even halfway done with it. Our next story on this show is about empathy. And I have none, um, but neither does AI. Sometimes AI fakes it. If you ever chat, our first episode on the Dirty Data Show was about how sycophantic the new rollout of ChatGPT 4.0 was. Hey, you're great. You're doing so great. What a wonderful idea, which is a little bit dangerous. AI can be prompted and can be tuned to be and seem more empathetic, to show emotion, to show feeling, to show understanding. And there's a new study in Nature. Nature, that's a big one. Dirty. This is dirty by nature. We're like similar to naughty by nature, but less popular. But the study in Nature showed how people respond when they're interfacing with a human that they know is a human and they're chatting with a human versus an AI, a large language model with a chat interface, and they know they're chatting with an AI. And regardless of the content of the responses from either the human or the AI, they are judged that the human is much more supportive and much more empathetic. But here's the cool part. When they say that humans have AI assistant tools available, even when they don't, if they if the instructions are vague and they're not sure if the human could be using AI assisted tools to respond to them, then they rate the responses as much less empathetic and much less supportive. So imagine that next time you're sending an email, you're responding to your colleague, and you think, I want to get the wording just right. Let me give it to an LLM. Hey, can you can you make this a little bit sappy for me? My employee skipped school. No, she skipped work. My employee skipped work because, whatever, her dog was sick or her kid had an early swim lesson she had to take her to. Next time you ask an LLM, hey, can you craft a response here that's a little bit more empathetic? Now, you don't want your nice M-dashy, generic sounding LLM response because even if the recipient just suspects that maybe the sender was using an LLM assisted tool, they rate it as much less supportive and much less empathetic. Now, that's pretty tough in today's world to get around if you're sending somebody a message, because if you're sending somebody like me a message, has always suspected that you was using an LLM. No matter what, if you say anything, you better fucking put in a lot of misspellings, and you just put commas upside down, hang them upside down, left and right, indentations. I better know that an LLM had nothing to do with that content, because if I even suspect it, then I don't think you're very supportive. I don't think you're very empathetic. I don't care if you're supportive or empathetic, but some people do. And if they suspect you're using large language models to respond to them, they ain't going to like it. So you got to game the system. The incentives are clearly there, they're clearly in place. Write like shit. Misspell, poor grammar. That's a way to come across as truly human and truly empathetic. All right. Our final story for the day, a study by METR, METR. It stands for something, probably. It doesn't spell nothing, METR, but I would pronounce it meter, so I will. A study by METR showed that AI tools in the IDE, I think they use Cursor explicitly for, yeah, okay, so Cursor. So a large language model, a code interpreter tool that's available within your development environment, so you don't have to go to your web interface, you're just developing right there and Cursor's helping you, slows, not speeds, slows. That's negative, going down. Slows developers by 19%. That's a lot. It's almost 20%. And I think this is the first study that shows AI slowing down development. A big caveat here are these are large, robust organizations with large, complicated repositories. This is not just, hey, I want to start some code for scratch. It doesn't depend on anything else. I just want it to, whatever, count the Sundays in 2021. The study didn't touch that, but I suspect that AI tools will help you on things like that, on your leet code problems that are one-off coding problems. But when context matters, when there's all kinds of dependencies around in your repository, and there's all type of institutional knowledge, I should mention, these are senior developers with at least 5 years experience, trying to use Cursor slows them down by 19%. Can you imagine launching this tool that is geared towards your productivity and speeding things up? And the people who are the most experienced working on the hardest problems, assuming it's the hardest problems, it's at least the biggest repository. It's a one-to-one, right? Size of repository versus hardness of the problem. Maybe. That's what I always say. Write more lines of code and you've got a harder problem. But Cursor is slowing them down. Now, goodness gracious, I, I'm I'm off the cuff here. This is not from the study, but in my mind, it's not only slowing them down, it's making their coding life worse, because writing code is more fun to everybody than debugging shitty code. And if you're using Cursor to help develop within a giant repository where it might get lost in the context or not have all of the context that it needs, then you're just debugging shitty code. And that's a lot worse than just writing your own code. So Cursor's slowing us down by 19%. and enraging us by, I would estimate it's probably another 19%. I don't have confidence intervals on that second one because I did just make it up. But come on, it's got to be true, right? You could at least empathize with me because it's clear I'm not using AI to return this response to you right now. Now, look, I don't think that's a generalizable statement that if you use Cursor, it's going to slow down your development. That's very much for people who are senior, very experienced, and experienced within a complicated, large repository. Okay, maybe they should just write a little bit of their code from scratch. But look, if you're like me and you suck at writing code and you're trying to, you're staring at a blank .py file, who am I kidding? I only work in notebooks. At a blank untitled -61.ipynb file, okay, Cursor's going to help me out. It's going to help me write a little bit of code faster. Okay, it's just going to. So I'm going to keep using it and other LLM tools, and I'm going to feel like I'm speeding up rather than slowing down. Maybe one day I'll be good enough where Cursor can slow me down too. An important omission from this story is that these people were all trained to use Cursor. I see you. I see somebody slamming on the steering. Well, of course, they're just telling these senior devs, they're like, I don't want to fucking use Cursor. I'm not using it. These devs were trained to use Cursor, and they were self-selected in good faith to try to use Cursor to improve their workflows. So, you know, maybe your point still stands, but at least the researchers, tried as best they could to account for this. Although if you really wanted to sabotage the study, you could say, I'd like to try to use Cursor. I'll take this 1 hour training class. I'll try to use it. And then you just go slow as shit and don't get any work done. Then that's really sticking it to Cursor. You know what? I hope that's the story behind it. I hope that's it. We didn't look at the distribution of how it slowed people down. It sped everybody up by 50%, except this one guy. It slowed him down by, 10,000%. And that's where they got the slow down by an average of 19%. Distributions are important, folks. Distributions are important. That's why I'm glad that Yingling traditional lager is distributed here to me in a good southern state, where for the first time I found myself pulling for Kyle Schwarber. I do have one other story, but first the prediction of the day. Not being great about giving a prediction every episode. I'm going to give one now. There is a rebuttal to the METR story that shows the exact same setup, shows experienced developers using an IDE based large language model with code interpreter, and it shows the exact opposite results, that it speeds things up. And people dissect details to find, well, how did it speed these people up and how did it slow these people down? But only listeners of the Dirty Data Show will know the truth, and that's because the slowdown team was just because of sabotage of one guy or anything that just took as long as they could. Sabotage, Cursor. That's what me thinks. All right, last thing for the day. For those of you who are watching, I've got a bookshelf behind me, all kinds of books on it, trying to make me look smart. I've got one book here. I'm going to start displaying it behind me. It's called Coding for Kids with Python. It's great. Learn to code with 50 awesome games and activities. I got a kid who's home for the summer who's learning to code with Python. But I have accidentally had this displayed prominently behind me during calls with clients for which I'm hired to be able to code in Python. And I just find it hilarious that a client would think they're paying this guy to help with Python coding. And I've got a Python for Kids book right behind me. Like, well, yeah, I can do it. I can do it. And I'm learning from this, targeted towards fourth graders book. That's some dirty data for you. This has been the Dirty Data Show. If you're listening to this, if you found this humorous, give it a like, give it a subscribe. We would love for you to continue listening. Coming up later this summer, we've got a lot of shows with guests where we'll still be doing the same format. We'll be covering the latest and greatest in today's stories about data and AI. But while we're doing it, we're going to introduce ourselves to a few cool guests and get some new perspectives. And maybe we'll argue over some shit. And maybe we'll have some predictions and we'll make some bets on whose predictions are better. Ooh, that's it. I like it. The dirty data prediction market. Yeah, somebody writes some cursor aided code about how that can come to be. This has been the Dirty Data Show. Thank you for listening.